The rage virus has turned Britain into a wasteland, with infected hordes roaming freely, killing anyone in their path. Months after the outbreak, American forces enter England to help survivors and control the spread. A group of survivors gathers for breakfast. Don and Alice, a couple anxiously missing their kids Tammy and Andy, who were away on a school trip when the virus broke out, search the cellar for supplies. Suddenly, a terrified boy knocks on the door, begging for help as the infected close in. Alice's maternal instinct takes over, and she lets the boy in, despite the survivors' warnings. Minutes later, the infected swarm the house, breaking through doors and windows. Amid the chaos, Don and Alice try to lead the survivors upstairs, hoping for higher ground, but the infected breach the barricades. As the horde overtakes the house, Don and Alice become separated in the panic. They reunite briefly in a bedroom, but the room is already filled with infected. Terrified, Don abandons Alice and the boy, fleeing out the window despite her desperate cries. Alice's screams echo as Don races toward a nearby boat. Though a friend helps him untie it, the infected catch up, dragging the friend into the water. Don escapes alone, haunted by his cowardice and guilt. The pandemic had finally ended. Military forces declared victory, and Britain began to rebuild. Survivors who had fled were now returning to their homeland. On board one of the returning planes were Tammy and Andy, Don's children. They had survived the months of chaos and were now being flown to a secure screening facility in London, where American soldiers assisted with recovery efforts. At the screening center, soldiers carefully scanned every returning citizen, checking for signs of infection. Tammy and Andy passed through medical tests alongside others, relieved to finally be back in their home country. As they waited to be transported to a safe zone, they spotted their father. "Tammy! Andy!" Don called, his voice filled with emotion. The children ran to him, and the three embraced tightly, finally reunited after months of separation. Don proudly showed them around the secure area. Soldiers patrolled the streets, snipers kept watch from rooftops, and facilities were under strict control. "I have access to everything," Don said, showing off his ID. That evening, the family sat down to talk. Tammy and Andy asked the question they had been dreading to ask. "What happened to Mom?" Don's expression darkened. He fought back tears as he described the night they were attacked. He told them how Alice had been bitten, and how he had fled in a moment of panic. Tammy and Andy sat in stunned silence, their mother's loss weighing heavily on them. Determined to honor their mother's memory, the siblings decided to sneak out of the safe zone the following morning to retrieve photos and keepsakes from their old home. They knew the risks but were willing to take them. The next morning, Tammy and Andy slipped past the guards and ventured into the abandoned streets of London. Doyle, a sniper assigned to patrol the area, spotted the children from a rooftop. Concerned, he radioed his friend Flynn, a helicopter pilot. "Got 2 civilians on the move. I'm gonna follow them." Tammy and Andy stumbled upon a derelict pizza shop. Hoping to find a working vehicle, Tammy told Andy to wait while she searched inside. Covering her nose against the smell of decay, Tammy crept through the dusty kitchen. In the back, she spotted the body of a delivery man slumped against the wall. Keys dangled from his belt. Tammy reached for the keys, but as she did, cockroaches spilled from the man's jacket, scattering across the floor. She yelped and ran outside, keys in hand. The siblings mounted an old scooter and rode toward their former home. When they arrived, the house stood eerily silent. They explored the familiar rooms, memories flooding back with every step. But as Andy ventured upstairs, he noticed movement in one of the bedrooms. "Tammy, someone's here!" To their shock, it was Alice. She was alive, but something was wrong. Her skin was pale, her eyes bloodshot. Just as she was about to bite, soldiers burst into the room and subdued her. They ran tests and discovered that Alice carried the virus but was immune to its effects. Scarlett, an army doctor, realized that Alice's blood might hold the key to a cure. But the commanding officer, Stone, ordered her execution, fearing the risk she posed. Desperate to see his wife again, Don sneaked into the facility where Alice was being held. He found Tammy and Andy waiting outside and tried to explain himself, but they refused to forgive him. Inside, Don found Alice chained to a gurney. Guilt overwhelmed him. "I'm so sorry, Alice. I never should have left you." He leaned down, kissed her, transferred to him. Don's body convulsed, and rage overtook him. Infected and out of control, Don smashed Alice's skull in a fit of madness and escaped the facility, spreading the virus throughout the safe zone. Chaos erupted as soldiers fought to contain the outbreak, but it was too late. Scarlett realized that Tammy and Andy's genetics might hold the key to a cure. She grabbed the siblings and fled through the panicked streets, determined to keep them safe. But Don, now fully infected, pursued them relentlessly. The group reached a park, where Doyle contacted Flynn for extraction. Flynn arrived but refused to take anyone except Doyle. Infected swarmed the area, forcing Flynn to use the helicopter's blades to mow them down. Scarlett, Doyle, Tammy, and Andy fled into the city, knowing they had to reach the stadium where Flynn could extract them. As Scarlett and Doyle see poison gas and fire coming from soldiers, they find a car, and when trying to start the vehicle, the clutch doesn't work. Doyle tells Scarlett he is going to push the car, and she will be able to start the car. As Doyle is pushing the car, he is killed. As they made their way through the subway, the group was ambushed. Don appeared more monstrous than ever. In the darkness, he beat Scarlett to death with Doyle's rifle. He then lunged at Andy, biting him. Tammy, in a moment of desperation, grabbed the rifle and shot her father, killing him to save her brother. Andy, now bitten, began to panic. "I'm infected. I'll hurt you." Tammy knelt beside him, her voice steady. "You're like Mom. You're immune. You won't hurt me." The siblings reached the stadium, where Flynn waited. Moved by Doyle's sacrifice, Flynn allowed them aboard the helicopter. As they lifted off, Tammy held her brother's hand, knowing they carried the hope for humanity in their blood. But as the helicopter soared over the city, no one noticed the faint red glint in Andy's eyes. The helicopter landing somewhere in France, reigniting the deadly cycle.